Folks, if y'all turn in your Bibles to Titus chapter 2, verse 7. This is not a Bible verse that a lot of people usually run to. Titus is pretty short as it goes. The greatest commandment is love God and love your neighbor as yourself, and so often we don't do that part. We don't love ourselves. So how do we do that? We must awaken to our need for that, to accept our need for that. We don't take it to death, we just accept it. We third take responsibility for our sin and our future that God has planned for us, and we're assertive forth with that future, the person that Christ is making us to be. And fifth, we live as a man or woman whose purpose is to know Jesus and not just to know about him. And how do we continue in that love? I would say, as we look to the scripture, it is to maintain our integrity. So let's look at Titus 2, verse 7 and 8. In everything, set them an example by doing what is good. In your teaching, show integrity, seriousness, and soundness of speech that cannot be condemned, so that those who oppose you may be ashamed because they have nothing bad to say about us. This is the word of God for the people of God, and all God's people said. Thank you to God. Yeah. Now, when these words were written, the Church of Jesus Christ was basically in a crisis. Even as we were just getting started, we were having an internal argument over how much of the Jewish law did the new Gentile converts have to obey. And Peter had a vision from God where the food laws were taken out, and that was okay, and everybody understood that. And that solved the problem. But what about the rest of it? There were some Christians, and the last Peter and James, the brother of Jesus, were among them, that were teaching basically that somebody who was non-Jewish or Gentile had to become Jewish before they became a Christian. Specifically, they were talking about circumcision. And this group had two names, because if we have factions, we always have to have names for some reason. Because, I don't know, basically because we have to talk about them, and we can't just keep saying them. And the first one was called the Judaizers, and the second name, Paul calls them in this letter to Titus, the circumcision group. Now, the circumcision group, I don't know about you, but to me that sounds like an investment firm with really high fees or something like that. But who were these people? Who were these people that led the other side? And I know you're all good Bible readers, and none of you would dare miss a Sunday morning class here. But who led the opposition to this legalism was Paul and his masses of new Greek converts to the Christian faith. And they were teaching that the overriding sign of being a Christian was not some kind of modest amputation. The overriding signs of the Christian faith for Paul and these Christians were first faith in Jesus Christ, and then baptism, and then a public confession of the faith, and then a life in line with God's will, as John Wesley would call it, and many others would call it holy living. Now I want you to notice something, and the United Methodist Church may have something to learn from this disagreement. If you read Titus very closely, there are no calls for unity at any price. There are no calls for some kind of local option. There was no idol of unity set up in the church house in place of the cross of Jesus Christ. And Paul even said that the circumcision group, quote, must be silenced because they are ruining whole households, because they are teaching things they ought not to teach. That was Titus chapter 1, verse 11. So at the very least, Paul is trying to coordinate and mount a vigorous response to this heresy. And eventually he stands up to Peter himself. He did this in Galatians 2. That's where he records it. There's a huge church council. Yes, those are biblical. That happened in Acts 15. And then there comes along, it all comes to a head at that, and it officially gets settled. And the Greek Christians basically win. The only thing about Judaism that is held onto officially are the Jewish rules against idolatry, particularly in regards to food sacrifice, which was a big deal back then, and the definition of sexual immorality. All of those remain from the Torah law. Now, the mess was still made, and And just because you have some kind of official response doesn't mean the thing has really been cleaned up. It had to be cleaned up from house church to house church. And this long introduction gets us to where we've been going all along, which is to Titus himself. And one of the places that Paul needed this mess cleaned up was Crete. And Crete is it's an island of the eastern Mediterranean Sea. It's about 150 miles long. It ranges in width from 35 miles wide to 7.5 miles wide. Basically, it's a lumpy banana in the middle of the ocean, or the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. And according to Titus 1:5, Paul left Titus there in Crete that he might, quote, straighten out what was left unfinished regarding this conflict in the church and appoint elders in every town. What that meant is that he had to clean up the unsound doctrine. He had to make sure that well-trained Orthodox leaders were in place, or we'd skip back to wherever we were with a bunch of religious legalism. And at the time, another complicating factor was Crete was really interesting. Crete was one of the major, if not the major, harbors for piracy during the Roman Empire. There was a Cretan saying that Paul actually quotes in Titus 1:12 that said, Cretans are always liars and evil brutes and lazy gluttons. I mean, this is what they say about themselves in this time, all right? Basically, anybody ever seen Pirates of the Caribbean? Okay, Crete is Tortuga, except they hadn't invented rum yet, okay? Now, imagine a church on Tortuga. You would have SPRC chair Elizabeth Swan, and trustee chair Hector Barbosa, and chair of church council Jack Sparrow, and all of these things, okay? Doug's laughing, okay. Titus had quite the task ahead of him in his hands. Now, this is why Paul says to him what he says to him in the scripture. He says, in everything, set an example by what you're doing, by doing good. In your teaching, show integrity and seriousness and soundness of speech that can't be condemned, so that all those who oppose you may be ashamed and have nothing bad to say about us. And you might say, now hang on, Trav, I have an objection to this. These are instructions given from one pastor to another. This doesn't apply to us. Okay, interesting. By that logic, pastors are the only ones who have to keep the Christian faith. And everybody can just sort of trot off as if Jesus never happened, okay, and doesn't care how we live. Paul was one for salvation by faith, but not by works. But if he didn't believe in holy living, then why did he spend so much time teaching it, not just to the pastors that he supervised and the church leaders that he supervised, but to the whole church? These lessons and letters about holy living are written to the entire church in many ways. Now, what James had said, what good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Deeds is not just serving in a soup kitchen. Deeds is holy living, personal and public. Integrity, in other words, faith, the faith of those who have no integrity is dead. And integrity is when your word and your faith and your deeds are one. Now, back up a little bit. The girls and I have been watching a new show. And it's not new, but it's actually in its last season, which is unfortunate for us. It's called Fixer Upper. Y'all ever watch Fixer Upper? I don't know, is it Chip Gaines? Okay, is it Chip and Joanna? Okay, y'all know better than I do. All right, I can't ever remember the name. I can remember Joanna's name, but I can't remember Chip's name. But he has a funny laugh. All right, these people, they renovate homes. They deliberately go to the worst home in the neighborhood, and because you can get that for the cheapest and get the maximum return. Okay, and they fix it up, and they do it for a family, and the house always starts out as a mess. Okay, and the house always ends up ready for the magazines, and the old home effectively becomes a new creation. Now the Bible says that when we are in Jesus Christ, we are a new creation too. How would it be if on Fixer Upper they went in to renovate a home and then renovated it and then turned right back to trash it again? I mean, even with the same raccoon stains. Okay? Would they do that? Of course they would not. They renovate for a purpose, and we are saved for a purpose, and not just heaven, but for a holy life. Eternal life is knowing Jesus Christ, not just knowing about him. And the relationship makes a difference in how we live. Now, for a new creation, we will have integrity. Our faith and deeds will be one. There's a young theologian who's making great waves these days. He's a Methodist theologian. His name is Ryan Danker. And he said this, I ran upon this quote. Ryan said, "Salvation is not simply realizing that we are children of God. It is being awakened to our enmity with God and his ways, and then by God's power becoming children of God. Before this change, we are children of wrath." Salvation is a change. It is not a realization. What does that mean? Not just your soul, but your integrity was paid for by the blood of Jesus. So don't throw it away, even when you're alone and nobody's looking. And there will, you look on the cover of your bulletin. This is why I put that on there. There will be whispers in your ear. There will be whispers in your ear from others to sort of just not be so serious and not have so much integrity. And there will be whispers in your ear from the enemy. Don't have so much integrity. Just relax a little bit. Friends, your love of yourself comes from the sacrifice and love of Jesus. Ignore these whispers and don't waste it. John Wesley was asked one time about what it meant to be born again. He said this, he said, "It is the great change which God works in the soul when he brings it to life, and when he raises it from the death of sin to the life of righteousness." In a way, you were saved for integrity. And that is one of the best ways that you can love yourself. And there's something about integrity. Integrity involves the public life, that which is seen and perceived by others. And there's always going to be some nitwit that misunderstands what you do publicly. Just try to love them as Jesus loved them. That's really, really difficult, but just go with it, okay? But your integrity is your witness as best as you possibly can. And Paul said this to Titus, "In everything, set an example by doing good." What does that mean? The Greek there could be literally translated, "In all things, show yourself." The Greek there is, let me get this right, typon, kalon, ergon, a prototype or model of good works. And you may be thinking, okay, Trav, look, I don't want to be that type of Christian. I don't want to be that type of Christian and do all that stuff. Okay, look, when do we ever say that about nearly any other hat that we wear? I don't want to be that type of teacher. I don't want to be excellent. I don't want to be that type of employee. I don't want to be excellent. I just want to muck along. I don't want to be that type of student. I'd be totally satisfied with a C. I don't want to be that type of engineer. Who cares if it blows up? I don't want to be that type of parent. Who cares if my kids don't amount to anything? Can you just muddle along in anything else and get by? I mean, and all, look, I know y'all, you are not muddle along people. You're not. You want to be excellent. We want to be excellent in many areas of our life. Why not the faith? Why not our witness and our integrity as Paul described so long ago? Okay, so how do we love ourselves? We first awaken to the need. Second, we accept that need. We don't take it to death. And this is really hard for me not to take things to death. Okay? I am reborn every morning with the word why on my lips. Okay? One of my old bosses said to me, "Boy," and you know you're in trouble when they say boy. "Boy, a good engineer doesn't do anything but ask why 5 times and then act on what he learns." This may help the programmers of the world. Assume for a second, if you have trouble with this truth, that you are to love yourself. It is a given in the data set, and you are to do that until the data contradict the assumption. And trust me, there are people in this room who have PhDs who will testify to decades of experimental Christian living that they have found that loving themselves is intimately connected to loving God and their neighbor, and the data will never contradict that assumption. Third thing is we take responsibility for our sin and our future that God has planned for us. And you may be down now. You may even be confused. Everybody in this room has lost friends and loved ones very, very recently. But I know that each of those that we have lost would testify to the real biblical self-love that the scriptures talk about. It is never unwise, and all of them have left us a witness to that fact. Fourth thing is we've got to be assertive with that future, the person that Christ is making us to be. You are going somewhere. Each and every one of you and one of us is going somewhere in this life and the next. Will it be difficult? Yes. Will it be worth it? Yes. So find it. Try a million things. Dare greatly. Packing a pew is not loving yourself. Living for Jesus Christ is. Fifth thing, live as a man or woman whose purpose is to know Jesus, not just to know about him. How can you love yourself if you cut yourself off from the source of all love? He is the way, the truth, the light, the resurrection itself, and he is love, so go after him with all of your heart and your mind and your soul. And then finally, integrity. Go after Jesus Christ publicly and privately with your head and your heart and your mind and your soul, and in everything. Set a good example and maintain your integrity. If for no other reason, then you might lead some other to love the Lord and love their neighbor and love themselves. And that, my friends, will actually change the world. Now, let me ask you, have you really and truly met Jesus? Have you been really and truly filled with his love? If you haven't, that may be why you have trouble loving yourself, or at least one of the reasons. You can't live and love without him in truthfulness. Without his love, without his power, it is very difficult to truly love yourself. If you would have the first best reason to love yourself, start with him. Don't just know about him, know him. Ask him into your heart right now and start following him with everything you have, and do it with integrity. And I ask you to do that now. You can come to the altar. You can whisper it to him in your pew. You can even wait a little bit and get in the car and go home. And don't get in a car wreck on the way, okay? But right now, come to Christ and say, I want to live in love and integrity. In Jesus' name.